All right, in this episode, we have 2018 Pisgah Stage Race winner, U.S. Cyclocross team member, and senior coach at the Carmichael Training Center. Welcome to the hot seat, Tristan Cowie. How you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So where are you at right now?
I'm down in Brevard. CTS, Carmichael Training Systems, has a couple of locations nationwide. There's one in Brevard, which used to be in Asheville, moved down to Brevard about 8 years ago, 7 years ago or so. One in Colorado Springs is the headquarters, and then one in Tucson, and then one in Santa Ynez, California, LA.
Okay.
So.
All right, well, we'll get into that here in a little bit, but first let's start off. What is something that most people don't know about you?
I don't own any sleeveless shirts. Um,
You don't own any
I
sleeveless
don't.
shirts.
No, yeah.
Now, what's up with
All
that?
all my shirts have sleeves on them. So, um, no, but really, I don't think that a lot of people. I love cooking and barbecuing, and I love car racing. So, it's kind of a weird coming from a cycling background and endurance sport. It's those are a little, not often combined.
What kind of car racing?
All types, mostly Formula One. I'm trying to get into a little bit of IndyCar, doing a little bit of the endurance, World Endurance Championship, the WEC series. I like all sorts of motorsports. I watch motorcycles, any of that stuff. I like going fast. So
You ever seen any Ultra 4 racing, like King of the Hammers or any of that kind of stuff?
a little bit, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not super familiar with that.
I went and did some filming projects on a few of those events. It's something to check out, dude. These cars can go through anything, man. You could put one of these cars right in the Davidson River and it would climb right to the top of the mountain. Like,
Oh,
no
that's
joke.
sweet. That's
All right,
cool.
before we get too off the rails, let's start from the beginning. Before you were a trainer and before you were on the U.S. team and all this stuff, where are you from and what were you like as a kid?
Well, I grew up in North Georgia originally, and that was kind of, we rode bikes, but it wasn't as well known as, kind of as it is now. I mean, North Georgia is kind of, becoming a more and more cycling destination, kind of like Brevard and Western North Carolina is. But yeah, we had a good amount of kind of forested land, and I grew up outside, like running around outside, playing outside. Did a little bit of soccer, a little bit of running, but it was kind of always kind of had bikes around. But it wasn't until kind of trying to remember what year I was 9 years old or so, and did my first race. So.
Where was that, on a BMX or what was that?
It was mountain bike. So actually again we kind of grew up riding mountain bikes around the house and going to trails where we could find them. That was kind of before the day of the internet or well, I guess the internet was in its infancy. I'm not that old, but it was tough finding stuff. So we were just kind of exploring a little bit, and there was a local nature center that did summer camps, and my sister, she was big into bikes as well, and she did I was too young to do the mountain bike camp there, but she did it. And they were, the instructors were like, oh, you guys should try out this race later on this fall in Gainesville, and we went over there and we did it and hooked ever since. So.
Nice. And so did you have a mentor during this time or how did you get introduced to it?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, like kind of throughout different stages of my career, I had different kind of mentors, in different areas because growing up, it was kind of, my dad was really into it, into riding. So he kind of got, myself and my sister into riding. And then it was kind of, we had our bubble of the summer camp. We met some folks that worked for Sorba, Georgia. And they kind of introduced us to some more people. And then we started racing more. And then I got introduced to Andy Johnson, who runs a development team or used to run a development team in Georgia. And then he was kind of like, okay, well, there's all these other races kind of regionally and nationally. And then, so did that circuit, looked at going to colleges, found Thad Walker, who ran the cycling team at Brevard College, And then, kind of my current, I'd say mentor slash friend would be Wes Dixon at Sycamore, and he kind of, helped go, throughout my career has kind of been growing from, development into, collegiate racing into professional racing, and from then on.
I've noticed in these interviews that a lot of athletes have had someone who, really motivated them or just helped them take it to the next level. And it sounds like you've had two or three of those type of people in your life.
Yeah, I'd say, I was trying to think of, if I could place my finger on one, and not to say that that's not the case, because it's interesting. It was almost different stages and different levels that I was going through, and it was kind of, each level I just found out more and found out, like, okay, whoa, there's a state series, and then I can race in the Southeast, and then it's like, whoa, there's a national series, and then so it's kind of always been building, and you find more people, and yeah.
And then when did you make the transition into coaching? How'd that happen?
That was so I went to Brevard College, and I was an exercise science major, and I kind of had the idea of going into physical therapy, into PT stuff. And my last semester of school, I had to do an internship, so I was kind of like, like I don't know what to do. I can't find a place. All the other cool PT places that were already full, and my counselor was like, she knew I was a big cyclist, and she's like, well, there's CTS in Asheville, like, why don't you talk to them? Why don't you do some coaching? And I was like, oh, duh, that's probably a good idea. So I drove up there, and I knew Colin Izzard, who ran the office previously just from racing, and he ran a regional team that I tried out for. And it was like, hey, I really want to get into coaching. I did my internship, and that was about, I'm trying to remember how many, it was a semester or so. And then worked at the bike shop that summer, and then got hired that fall after graduating.
How's that experience been coaching?
It's awesome. Yeah. It's, at the end of the day, I love helping people. I love talking to people. I love, kind of helping them figure out, if it's the best place to eat in Nashville, or, how to get 10% on their, power test or something like that. I enjoy it. So, yeah, it's awesome. It's most of what I do is kind of, individual coaching, so not necessarily face to face, but over the internet, over the phone. I would say maybe 5% of my athletes are kind of local, so let's say within 2 to 3 hours, and the rest of them could be Midwest. I've coached people in Japan, Australia, Switzerland, all that. But yeah, it's awesome.
Is this all cross-country mountain bike coaching? Are you coaching road cycling, cyclocross, and all that? Or what exactly are you coaching through this program?
Any and all.
Okay.
Yeah. So my background is obviously mountain biking. I call myself a mountain biker. Recently, I got into cyclocross. For those that don't know, it's kind of like a combination of cross-country running, mountain biking, and road cycling. So you do it on a road bike. You do it on mixed surfaces, so trails, dirt, grass, pavement, whatever, anything that you can find at like a local park. And then there's certain segments of that course where it's, steps or barriers to, that you have to get off and run over. So it's kind of bringing a little of that cross training, weight bearing activity in there. So that's my background. But I coach any and all cyclists. I've coached a little bit of triathletes and runners. I do have a little bit of running background, but it's let's see, ORAM, Leadville. I've coached athletes for Leadville, done a couple Ironmans, a bunch of road racing. So yeah, any sort of endurance sport.
Is that typically how it works for you? Someone will have they'll sign up for a race or have a big goal in 6 months, and then they reach out to you guys and you customize something for them, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's pretty close. I'd say 80% of the time somebody comes to us with a goal, and it's like, hey, I have this event, or I have a series of events that I want to get ready for, and you kind of look at the events and what the event demands are. So, how long is it, how many climbs, what the climbs are like, what is it going to take for this person to get through the day? And then some people just come in and like, hey, I want to get fitter, and and our typical clientele is kind of like that 40 to 60 years old, empty nesters. Maybe they rode back in college or back when they were young, and they've kind of refound the sport. And they're like, yeah, I want to get back in shape and get healthy again. And that's great too. We'll kind of outline kind of fitness goals for them, and work with them to progress and lose weight and get back to feeling fitter.
What's your most commonly given advice? What do you see the most that you feel like you can help people with?
I would say for coaching, I would say, so again, like the typical athlete we have is kind of that, they're still working a job. They're time crunched, so to speak. They don't have unlimited time to train or ride. So it's really just, rest, eat well, ride your bike a lot, and make sure you're resting, and make sure that travel, life, family stress isn't kind of wearing you out, because when you're on the bike, I need you, and I need you 100%. So.
Right. Okay. So rest and take care of everything else so you're clear headed when it's time to get on the bike.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, I like that. Well, let's step away from you actually coaching. You're definitely competing. 2018 was a pretty big year. Like I said in the intro, you won the stage race, pretty prestigious event right here in Pisgah National Forest, and the Pin-Bar race, which has got, over the years, the Pisgah Mountain Bike Adventure Race has got way, way more competitive for that podium. You represented the U.S. in cyclocross, which is, I'm hearing, kind of a new thing for you, a new sport for you, or a new discipline of cycling.
Yeah, yep.
Well, what happened in 2018? How did all this happen? How did you make it happen?
I, I don't really know, to tell you the truth. No, confidence. For whatever it was, that year kind of started out, and basically the first race I did was the stage race. And the first day, I was like, we were in a group, we were going up some of the climbs, and I think I finally got it in my head that when you're in a race and you're suffering, everybody else is feeling the same way, But it's so hard to tell yourself that when you're in the pain cave and you're trying to push so hard, and you look over at the other guy and he's as cool as a cucumber, but inside it's like you're melting. So we're going up this climb, and I'm on the rivet, so to speak. I'm in the pain cave. I'm going as hard as I can, and I was like, you know what? We're just gonna attack everybody, and just stood up, jumped on the pedals, rode away from everybody, got a gap, was able to hold that for the rest of the stage, and ended up taking the win. And that theme kind of continued throughout the year, and it was kind of as a junior, it's like you're full of energy and you're excited and you want to take off from the start and get first person to the turn and lead the race the whole time. And I think throughout my training and racing, you kind of lose a little bit of that. You try to pace yourself a little bit more. You try to save too much. And I think it was good to have a really, really good base of fitness, and also just kind of have that kick in your rear and be like, dude, you got this. Like, roll the dice, see what happens. If it doesn't work, they're still working just as hard as you, and they're going to feel it. So that was kind of the theme for the year.
What do you think caused that mental shift? What do you think was there an aha moment? Was it just that race and it just hit you and you were like, now is my time? What do you think caused that?
I think, I go back to, if I could call it something, again, I think it'd be confidence. And just, I was like, okay, I don't really know what's going to happen, but I know I'm in a good spot fitness-wise, and I know that I can get these guys on the next ascent, and let's push hard and see what happens. And that kind of, in the next couple of races, like, let's see, I won ORAM that year, and Pin-Bar was really good. And Pin-Bar is a little bit more of like a pacing, but, ORAM into cyclocross season, I kind of kept that, it's more like there's a saying, more for road racing, but you can apply it to anything. It's like, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. So it's like you always got to be fighting for the front and pushing for the front. And I think I kind of lost that in my development years a little bit. And it was finally like, yeah, you got this, do this. So
yeah, big props. So big year 2018. You probably weren't always on top of the podium. Tell me some of your lowest moments. Was there a time when you were just like, I'm done with this biking thing?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah, that's the funny thing. Cycling and sports in general. It's like you lose a lot more than you win. It's tough. I mean, knock on wood, I've never had a big injury where I've kind of had to climb out of that hole. So knock on wood, and thankfully I've never had that. But I have had some. You just, oh man, I could think of so many examples. Driving, when I was a junior, I was trying to qualify for the World Championships as a junior at the start of the year, and my parents flew me out to this race in what was it, Phoenix, and we were out in Phoenix, and I was leading the race, the qualifying race. I started out, I was feeling good, and then I flatted. And then I was like, all right, cool. So I fixed it, and I flat again, and then I flat the rear wheel, and then I had to walk back. And my parents were super supportive, and they were, not in a bad way, but you could see it in their eyes, like, why did we come out here? Like, why did we spend all this money? So, yeah, a lot of it is just you bang your head on the door, and eventually it opens, but sometimes it could be a long time.
Oh, I'm going to steal that one from you. You keep banging your head on the door, and eventually it'll open.
Yeah.
What about the best moment in competition? What stands out?
I would say, let's see, that was 2000, the year before, or I should say the season before I went to Worlds, was another kind of, not aha moment, but it was one of those confidence things where I won a local cyclocross race, a UCI race. It was a pretty high level over in Hendersonville, and that was probably one of the coolest feelings, I think. I've done a lot of races, I've won a lot of races, but that was, I won, not quite in my hometown, but we'll call it hometown. I live 15 minutes away. My address is not Hendersonville, but we'll call it. But it was like, hometown win. All my friends are there. I knew the announcer. I knew that, everyone there. And that was kind of my training course throughout the summer. So I had done hundreds of laps on that course and knew everything. So it was like finally put everything together at once. And that was a really cool feeling. But I would say that's kind of like my best win, I guess. But, another equally as good feeling was there's Asheville Cyclocross used to do a couple of clinics throughout the summer, so kind of starting in August to be once a week, and I'd volunteer my time as a coach and kind of racer to go out there and help people and teach skills and that sort of thing. And Asheville Cyclocross has a race series, and the very last race, this guy came up to me and was like, hey, I came to those clinics, and, just want to thank you. Like, I started out the season mid-pack, and then I used all the skills you taught me, and then I won the last race. And that was, huge. So I'd say, yeah, I mean, I have to say the Hendersonville race was like one of the best feelings, because I was hometown, everything was perfect that day, but it's like, that's such a good feeling to do your job and just give back to the sport. So those are my top two.
Yeah. No, I love that. So, we talked a little bit about, knocking your head against the door until it finally opens, and that's kind of like a little bit of a secret sauce there for any athlete who's trying to reach the top. What about coaching? You obviously had a learning curve. Early on, I mean, you probably were not quite the coach that you are now. Tell me about that progression.
Oh, yeah, it's hard because a lot of it is, as a coach, you got to know your stuff. You got to know your exercise physiology, and you have to know what you're talking about. But you have to put it in a way that, somebody that has no idea about that will understand. So, it's breaking that, that complex science side of things and breaking it down into something that, they get. And as a coach, there's a really, really good book. My dentist actually gave it to me. It's Coaching the Mental Game. And basically it's more centered around kind of ball sports. But one of the takeaway points from that was, as a coach, you're always learning, you're always developing, and you never can think that, whatever you're saying, someone is going to understand. So like, think of like, let's say there's a coach or an athlete talking about, their friend, and they're uncoachable, like they don't get anything. And it's like, okay, well, is it the athlete or is it the coach? Is the coach putting that in a way that they understand and telling it? Are they describing it? Can you do it visually? Can you do it auditory? So I think as a coach, you're always trying to okay, how can I say this better? How can I say this, more efficient? So that's something I really enjoy too.
If there's a young rider who wants to win the stage race, if they want to get to where you're at, they're just starting out doing some races. What's some nuggets of advice you'd give them?
I'd say for a developing rider, be multi everything, multidiscipline. Try out a bunch of stuff, try out a bunch of different events. Cyclocross, road, mountain. Try everything. See what you like, see what you don't like. Also, I think it's important to be multi-divisional and just get some different experiences. I mean, cycling is great. You can make a living racing a bike, but kind of they're not completely gone, but kind of gone are the days of you win on Sunday, sell it on Monday sort of thing for the companies.
Right.
So it's less about winning races, although that's important, but it's more about what's the lifestyle, what's the influence I can have. So I think there's definitely something to be important, or it's important to have do some different stuff. Communication, marketing, exercise science, engineering. And then you can still be a racer and still be good, but then you're so much more valuable to the company as a racer and as whatever you're studying. So
right. You're multidimensional. You mentioned cross training. Are there any other sports outside of cycling that you like to do?
I like to do some. So so cross training. Is it beneficial? Definitely. It's good to have a variety. Every sport kind of boils down to the rule of specificity, which basically means that the better you want to be at something, the more you have to do it. However, most of us are kind of, we're not doing it for professionally. We're not getting paid to do it. So it's like, let's have some spice of life and do something different. However, I say all that, and then it's like I'm kind of getting to the point now where it's, I'm a little time crunched and I can't ride as much as I want to. So I usually revert to doing my favorite thing, which is riding, and it's kind of a de-stressor. But hiking, walking, I do a little running occasionally. I wouldn't consider myself a runner, but yeah, and I think I think more so getting outside and just using it. Like we're fortunate to live over in Western North Carolina and have huge national forests. So get out there and do something. It'd be good.
In some of the other interviews, a lot of people have mentioned that doing a different sport or whatnot just sometimes can break a cycle. Can just like reboot their head. Have you ever seen that with any of the people you've coached or felt it yourself, where you've kind of stepped away for a month and done something different and came back and it looked totally different?
For sure. Yeah, I'd say I see that a lot with athletes I work with. I actually, I still work with a guy up in Minnesota. He came to the company as a professional snowmobile racer. And then he went into road racing on the bike. And then recently, I started working with him. And he's taken up mountain biking during the summer and then cross-country skiing during the winter. So that's kind of cool to watch that progression. And it's like, yeah, there's people doing everything out there.
One of the questions I always ask that I always get so many crazy, there is virtually no trend to the answer of this question. What's your thoughts on diet?
Well, Julia Childs is my favorite cook.
Who's
She has
that?
Julia Childs.
Okay, yep.
Yep. And she has a quote. I think it's actually from Orson Welles or something like that. But it works better if Julia says it. But basically, everything in moderation, including moderation. So diet's important. Eating right, eating healthy, eating good food is super, super important. But, it's like, hey, I got guilty pleasures. I love kind of one of my pastimes is making barbecue. And barbecue is not healthy, but it's kind of more about, I don't want to call it I don't like the term cheat day, but it's kind of like that. It's more, I get up early in the morning, I put my, meat on the grill, I rub it, I start the smoker, I smoke it all day, and then at night, all my friends come over and we just kind of chow down. It's more that kind of community, and food is a drug. It'll affect your moods and affect how you're doing, and eating something like that is going to kind of bring people together, because it's food is kind of that universal language. Everybody, you can find something to talk about.
Let me break down a couple diets. What do you think about being a vegetarian?
I think it's good. It's awesome. I had to live with a vegetarian for a while. My sister was a vegetarian, so growing up, I didn't have a whole lot of meat. I love meat, but if it wasn't a bad thing. I think that's a really, really good choice. You can get, as long as you're careful about your protein and where you get it from. It's no different. It's a good wholesome diet, and as long as you're kind of getting that protein where you need to get it from, it's good.
I got a neighbor who's just raving constantly about Keto Diet.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that one?
It's
First, explain what it is from your from your knowledge base. What is the Keto Diet?
Yeah. So basically, it's kind of the new age Atkins diet, let's say. So you're cutting out carbohydrate, you're focusing a lot on proteins and fats, and then you're basically feeling a little bit more full, so you don't eat as much. That works if you're not necessarily an endurance athlete. So when you're exercising, carbohydrate is kind of like that race fuel. It's super, burns, high burning, clean energy type of fuel. So when you're riding, you want to eat carbs. They're not a bad thing, because that's going to give you that really quick energy that you need. Fat's going to take too long to break down. And people make the argument of like, well, okay, well, if I ride slower or I ride faster or whatever, then I can start burning fat better. Well, it's like, okay, but you got to ride slow. Right. That's limiting your ability to work at an intensity that you need to. So yeah, carbohydrates are good. Keep them in there. They're not a bad thing. I do have a couple of athletes that I've worked with that want to try similar diets and that sort of thing. And I always tell them, it's like, okay, that's fine. Do what you can, but at least before and after that ride, kind of around that pyramid, like let's say that the ride / workout is the most important part of your day. Before and after that, eat some carbs, properly fuel for that ride. Away from that, do what you want. But give me that high quality stuff, and because that's going to make that workout much more or much higher quality.
What do you think? What would you prescribe as the optimum hours a week of practicing your given discipline? So take out like going to the gym or things like that. Let's say you're training for a cyclocross race. How long would you recommend somebody? How many hours to put in a week, and how many hours is too much? Like when do you start seeing that overtraining thing?
It's tough to say. So that all kind of depends on the event. Like what are you getting ready for? How long is it? How many races you're doing? What's your athletic background? Like how long have you been riding, or maybe you've been doing another cardiovascular sport, swimming, running. So it's tough to say what's good or bad. I've got people that have 4 to 6 hours a week. Maybe, so then it's might be, 2 or 3 rides a week. And it's like, okay, those are super, super focused. And I have other people that are, are retired. So it's like, all right, I can just load you up and do as much as you want. When an athlete comes to me with, like, hey, I can ride X amount, I try to work right up to that limit and then maximize their time. But for example, when I was racing pretty competitively, like kind of college and early professional years. I was probably doing 15 plus or minus a week on the bike. And then in recent years, it's kind of gone down to 10 to 12 maybe. And then, well, my wife and I just had a kid, so it's been like 8.
Now
So,
the fun begins.
yep. So I'm lucky to get in like 10 plus hours.
How
So,
how old's your son or daughter?
uh, my daughter is 3 months. 3 months Tuesday
Oh, so
this week.
you're just dropping into sleep
Oh
deprivation
yeah.
zone right
Oh
now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not so bad. Like, I feel good when I'm riding, but it's like that the recovery is I can't sleep, so it's done.
Oh, the games begin. Well, it just gets better. So, um, what do you've been riding bikes since you said 9 years old. What's the industry like now compared to when you first started riding, and where do you see it going in the future?
I think going back to that, it's a little bit less that win on Sunday, sell on Monday type thing. At least with the racing side of things. So it's before it was you had all these racers. They were traveling the world, getting paid a lot of money, and it's kind of shifted into more of this, whatever you want to call it, influencer lifestyle sort of thing. You still have the racers, you still have the bread and butter of the company, but then there's people that are like I think a good example is Adam Craig, if those of you are familiar or not. He was a pro mountain biker. He almost went to the Olympics, or did he go to the Olympics? Almost went to the Olympics. In get my dates back in the 2000s. But anyway, but he made a big deal of like riding mountain bikes and winning top level mountain bike races, and then like going kayaking, and then going dirt biking, and then and people loved that. They ate it up, and he is a really really cool dude. But it's kind of more about like, okay, that persona. I want to ride mountain bikes, but it's more kind of the lifestyle and less about racing. And I think that's kind of, racing is declining a little bit, and I think that's kind of part of it. It's just, people they just want to ride and just want to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. What about e-bikes? What's your thoughts on e-bikes?
At the end of the day, it's more people on bikes. I think that's a good thing. However, there needs to be some better rules outlined. At least here in Western North Carolina, there's a little bit of a pushback from National Forest Service and State Forest because they're kind of treating it like a motorized vehicle, and I think that kind of needs to be a little bit more defined, and kind of what's allowed, what's not allowed, and there's the whole, I think it's good getting, let's say, recovering, injury recovering people or older age groups out on bikes, but the skill level doesn't quite match the speed at which you're going. So I think, and I don't really have an answer for that, but it's, I like more people on bikes, but I like more people with better skills on those bikes. So.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's a tricky one for sure because the motors are just going to get stronger. Anyone who doesn't, lithium ion technology is here to stay. I know our company, we do a lot of filming with all kinds of different devices, but one thing that came on for us 6 or 7 years ago was the drones, the aerial.
Okay.
Those drones have got so incredibly much more powerful and such a bigger payload, and it's just a matter of time before you're going out there with like a bike that's got the equivalent power of like a 250cc motorcycle.
Yep.
So that's where I'm like, okay, how does this happen? Is there like a watt? You can only have so many watts to be legal, or you don't want somebody roosting up going up Laurel at like 35, 40 miles an hour up the hill. I mean, that seems a little out of place. So I don't know. It's interesting. I was a huge e-bike hater, and then last year I got on one, and now I'm on the bandwagon. So
Yeah.
so I don't really know. I don't really know how to
Yeah.
talk about it. But everyone I talk to has an opinion. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and it's here to stay. And it's I don't know, a problem, but it's a problem that we need to figure out and need to fix. But yeah, I just saw some specs on a new, I forget who it was, but they just started a new bike and it was like 22 pounds or
E-bike?
22 or 24. Yeah.
That's
I can't
ridiculous.
remember. Yeah, and I was like, because I think that's part of it, and the weight's going to come down too. But right now, it's like, yeah, you have this bike and it goes fast, but then if you're not pedaling or if you are, at a certain point, it becomes a heavy bike, So then it's not, you're still trying to manhandle this huge 40-pound bike around,
Especially,
which is
especially,
not easy.
especially when your battery dies.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
All right, so let's
Yep.
go. Let's talk about. Man, we're a little late with this one because you probably would want to be getting ready a little sooner if you were going to do pin bar this year. But let's talk about. Let's say you're 3 months out from pin bar and you want to win the race.
Well,
What would you have somebody do? What would a typical week look like? Just go
yeah,
out
so
there and just savage yourself.
kind of, yeah. So pin bar is like one of those kind of weird races because it's a checkpoint race and it's kind of half navigation, half riding.
That's a good
Um,
point. Maybe you should explain what pin bar is first.
yeah. So pin bar it's checkpoints. So there's roughly five checkpoints scattered throughout the forest. You have no idea where they are until the morning of the event, and you basically get a passport and you get a map, and you have to choose your own route. And there's certain trails that are off limits and certain stipulations depending on the year. And some of the checkpoints are mandatory, and then usually you can, I think it's like 4 out of 5 or 4 out of 6 or however many checkpoints there are. So there's a couple that are mandatory, and then if you go for extra ones, then it's bonus. So that it's a very unique race, but it usually ends up to be, the winning time could be, recent years it's kind of been between 5 hours and 7 hours. So it's a pretty long day on the bike over really, really rough terrain. Pin bar is kind of one of the weird ones too, where since the trails are really technical and it's a long day on the bike, you're trying to keep yourself and your bike together. So the trails, you almost want to ride at like 80% and ride fast, but not so fast that you run the risk of crashing or breaking something or something like that. And then when you spit out on a gravel road, it's full gas as hard as you can until you get back in the single track, and then it's kind of backing off. Whereas
Good advice.
usually it's usually the other way around. You're trying to, especially with mountain biking, it's a very skillful sport. So you're trying to, make the difference and attack people on technical sections or something like that. So if I was getting ready for that, and let's say I had 6 to 8 hours a week to train, I might do a couple of pretty concentrated rides during the week. So maybe 2 or 3 rides where I'm riding a certain section of trail if I can, or if I don't have access to a trail, maybe riding it at let's say like at 80% of race pace. So kind of that you're not going slow, but you're not going really, really hard. So let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 7 or 8. Whereas if you were racing, if you were sprinting up the hill, that was a 10, and then you were sitting on the couch, that's a 1. So kind of in that 80% range. And then on the weekends, just getting some really, really big rides. Again, hopefully on mountain bikes and/or at least mixed surfaces. So you get that, kind of technical aspect and just the, mountain trails and even gravel roads are not as smooth as pavement. So just making sure that the rest of your body, you're almost working on the engine room during the week, and then everything but the engine room on the weekend, your neck, your arms, your back, your butt, ready to be on the seat that long.
Yeah, good point there. I know that the last time I did it, I think we did like 72 miles, and my watch said we climbed like 16,000 feet or something like that. So
Sounds right.
so then let's kind of switch gears a little bit. So that's a 1-day big long ride. But let's switch to how would you prep, or how would you change that prep for something like a stage race where it's 5 days and each day is, maybe 2 or 3 hours. or even less, I guess, some of the stages, or maybe even less. I don't know.
Yeah, the Pisgah stage race is actually a pretty short. I think the stages this year, Todd has made a few changes here and there, so I think they'll be a little bit longer, but it's a relatively short race. But yeah, so something that's you got to, the stages are short, so it's really, really high intensity during those stages, but then it's, 5 days in a row. So your training needs to kind of reflect that. So again, if I was doing, let's say 6 to 8 hours, I would try to stack, maybe 2 hard rides back to back. So then I know, kind of what it feels like on tired legs, and maybe go out and hit, find a hilly route and ride the climbs, pretty much as hard as you can, and then do it again the next day. And you could do, at first glance, you could say like, okay, well, it's 5 days. I need to ride 5 days in a row. And it's like, yes, but if you do that, you're going to start to lose quality. So at a certain point, your rides are not necessarily going to be, gaining anything from them. You're just making yourself more tired. So kind of spacing those rides out a little bit more and doing, back-to-back days if you can, and then giving yourself a break is really going to help you feel fresher, push harder when you are back out on the bike, and then it's going to end up a better situation.
Interesting. What about your year coming up? What do you have planned?
Well, like I said, my wife and I just had a baby girl, so it's kind of balancing parenthood and racing. I do have the stage race. I'm probably going to stay a little bit more local with mountain bike stuff. So stage race. I think I'm going to sit out Pin Bar this year because that's the same weekend as the Rome Fest.
Yep.
Which one I need a break from it, and two, the wife is helping out with that. So ORAM, and then I want to do another cross season, but I'll probably do a little bit less kind of national events and focus more on the state series. Tim Hopkins lives over in Hendersonville. He puts on a great series. And he kind of has this, well, this is a little off topic, but if you win the series, you get a number 1 number, which in my entire career, I've never had a number 1. So yeah, I'm a little bit of an ego, like I kind of want that. So I think I'm going to do the state series, and I think it'd be cool. It's much more laid back than doing like a full pro season. And it's like, it's still hard. You got to show up and you got to stay consistent. And it's been a long time since I've gone for a series. So it's something different.
Let's talk about money. So you're traveling around doing this nationals tour and whatnot. Is your job at Carmichael paying for this? Do you have sponsors that help you along the way? How do you work it out?
A little bit of everything. So, so CTS is very flexible kind of work. I try to hold as close to office hours as I can. So Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And that was kind of the reason why I started racing more cyclocross, because cyclocross it's an hour-long race, and you usually get 2 races on a weekend. So it's much more bang for your buck than a mountain bike race, which is usually, if you go to a professional level one, it's probably West Coast or Midwest, Colorado area. So it's flying or big travel. Usually a ski resort, so lodging is pretty expensive. And just logistically, it's harder. So doing these races, CTS is super, super flexible with where I'm going. I can work, if I had to, I could work from home and kind of answer emails and that sort of stuff. I like to, kind of hold that professional side of things and hold office hours as close as I can. I race for a team that is kind of organized by Josh Whitmore. He's another coach at CTS, and this is a cool side story, but Josh he went to mountain bike world championships as a junior the year I was born. And actually later he raced in this little town called Kürtzarten, Germany. And later when I was a U23 and I was on the national team, I lived in that town and rode there. So little factoid. But he's super experienced. He's been doing it forever. He runs the team, which is also sponsored by CTS. So we have a little bit of kind of travel budget, and we're helped out with equipment and that sort of things. And then I kind of have my own personal sponsors that, depending on the race, depending on the season, depending on the discipline, they might want a little bit more bigger logos, more presence. So it's kind of a combination of all three of those.
How do you approach sponsorship?
It's all about what you can provide, and that's not that doesn't mean like, oh yeah, I'm really fast and I can win races. Going back to that lifestyle influence thing, it's like, okay, what do I bring to the table? And that's not necessarily I have 10,000 followers on Instagram. It's like, okay, what can I do as a person? Kind of like if you're applying for a job interview, it's like, okay, I'm really, really good talking to people. I'm really organized. I have a lot of knowledge in your particular product, in your methodology, or in your engineering, or whatever interests you. And then, that's going to make you much more valuable to the company, instead of just being like, okay, well, here's Joe Schmo, let's throw him some wheels and we'll never see him again. It's like, this guy's actively involved in selling, helping me sell more product, which is, the reason for marketing sponsorship, and is also really involved in developing it too. And like, hey, what can I do? This is what I do. What can I, help you guys out do more with? Or you get what I'm saying?
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And all that. So it's much more. It's a relationship, and it's not like, hey, give me free stuff because I'm fast.
Yeah. Think of it as a job interview. It's a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one. Well, I don't know, Tristan. Is there any sponsors you'd like to give a shout out to right now?
Yeah, for sure. Sycamore Cycles down in Brevard. Wes has helped me out for years and years and years, and he speaking of job interviews, and another kind of side story is I walked in. I started at college, and I walked in Sycamore. I was just checking out the local shop, and Wes, he's like, oh, like, you want a job? And he's like, and I just being cocky, 19-year-old, I was like, oh, I don't need a job. I need a real job. I don't need to work in a bike shop. And then later I came, crawling to him and was like, hey, can I have a job? And he's kind of helped me out ever since. Industry 9 is another kind of local Asheville company. They're awesome people. They make the best wheels. I'm not saying that because I've ridden them and all that. They are amazing. You put them on your bike and you can ride stuff that you never thought possible.
Yeah, I'll second that with the I9s. Clinton Company are all right.
Yep, they're good guys, and obviously Carmichael and they help me with a roof over my head. So big thanks to them. So
very cool. Where can our listeners find out more or follow you? Are you a Facebooker or a blogger, an Instagrammer? Where do people find you?
Yeah, so tcowie16 is my Instagram. I like posting up pictures. I'll try to do some fun stuff. It's mostly riding, but I like to sprinkle in some barbecue, baking every once in a while. I'm on Facebook, pretty active on that. The Carmichael website if you have any further questions about coaching. And come up and talk to me on a race. Yeah, I'd like to think that I'm pretty low key and just like riding bikes. Doesn't matter how fast. So love to talk to you.
Well, before we let you go here, let's talk barbecue.
Yeah.
So what's the secret to a good barbecue? Okay, let's start with chicken, because this is what I have the most trouble with. Like, how do you stick it with chicken?
Chicken's tough. It takes on a lot of smoke and it cooks really fast. So I like something smoky, so I usually go pretty heavy on the smoke, but be careful. It can really, really overpower that chicken.
Heavy on the smoke. So are you like super hot flame, or are you like putting this? How are you doing this?
Low and slow, man. 225. I've got a smoker, and I'm trying to think of the website. It's Meathead. Meathead is the guy, but go to Amazing Ribs. AmazingRibs.com is run by this guy called Meathead. He has a book, and it's actually really good. But it talks about he's got the science behind marinating 10-hour marinating between 15 minutes and how much it penetrates the meat and all that sort of stuff. It's a really, really good resource. It also has, for those aspiring smokers, it has a guide to set up a smoke a smoker on your gas grill, and that's what I started with, and then I kind of made my own smoker. But yeah, low and slow, 225, 230. Get yourself a really good thermometer, usually two, because then you can leave one inside the smoker or grill, and then you can have one for the meat to check and see if it's done. And yeah, just be patient.
How long are we talking at 225?
For chicken, 3 or 4 hours. Those are
All
pretty
right. There you have it, Hammer Factor Nation. Low and slow, 225, 3 or 4 hours.
good. That's it. Get yourself a good rub too.
All right. Well, thank you for sitting in on the hot seat, Tristan. And yeah, I'll be following you on Instagram, and looking forward to following and see how the year turns out and meet that little baby.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. Yeah, I had a pleasure talking, and thanks again.
All right.